The second hour is live, and we were always excited to talk about Georgia football with no one more excited to talk to about than Mike Griffith, who will be here in a second. Kirby Smart. Well, what did Kirby Smart have to say, and what is the shape of that program, which has only been the best in the country for the last 3 years? Let's find out. Griff, good afternoon. How's it going, and how was the weekend over there with the big game?
Yeah, pretty exciting. You know, Georgia G Day went about as well as it could go. I mean, nobody really lost. A tie game, a Chamber of Commerce, weather, a little stadium construction going on. They're adding on. They got the new press box, so the donors are going to be at the 50-yard line. That's going to make them really happy. I think Kirby left there seeing what he wanted to see, and that was Carson Beck really taking over this offense. He was able to challenge his defensive guys a little bit. That's one of the things that Kirby will do every spring. But I think things went about as well as they could go in Athens.
Yeah, by the way, where are they going to put the media with the donors getting the 50-yard line suits?
Well, we've got a really strategic location in the corner of the end zone, so we're going to have a very unique angle on the field that will enable us to present some things that the people watching on television that see the 50-yard line shot don't get. So I think that's going to help us out and give us some new angles for our stories.
Not to get off the subject, but is that the new norm around college football for the media to be put in a cardboard box and moved out of the limelight?
Well, I mean, you know, let's be honest. I mean, this is a sport that's built on money right now, and that premium seating is important. We saw it in basketball. You want the boosters on the floor; those seats go for more money. You want the boosters in the middle of the stadium. I mean, these are the people that are funding the program, and so they get the preferential seating, and I understand that. And you know, a lot of these schools now have their own media departments and school websites, and obviously. You know, there's tremendous coverage on the SEC network or ESPN or the Big Ten network, whatever. And so it is what it is. And no complaints here. I like going to football games, and you can still get a good feel for things. You can still talk to the people. The view's not quite as good, but if you know what you're looking for, it really doesn't make much of a difference.
So Griff, on that, you saw the game. You've been there all the time. So what are you looking for from this program? I mean, it's hard to come up with a question that does away with last season because it was really such an amazing year, except for a couple of plays in one game. But what is Georgia trying to do to be in a better position to win it all next year?
Well, I mean, this team's going to go as far as Carson Beck takes them, Paul. And Carson looked really good. I mean, this is a guy who was a first-year starter last year. You know, maybe didn't extend as many plays, maybe didn't take quite as many chances, but to be fair, the Georgia model offensively has always been about efficiency. They've always had a dynamic and strong defense to back them up. I'm not so sure that's going to be the case. I think the defense is still going to be solid and good, but you lose 3 guys out of your secondary. You got some young guys playing linebacker there. I'm not really sure what to say about the defensive line yet. I think Georgia's going to go into next season feeling like they need to score more points. They've got a great offensive line, probably one of the top 2 or 3 offensive lines in the nation. Trevor Etienne may be the most impactful transfer in the league. Watching him Saturday, I mean, the juice this guy has and this deceptive power, his ability to run through tackles, catch the ball, versatility, kind of shades of DeAndre Swift, if you remember DeAndre Swift at Georgia. A real dynamic playmaker. And then on the perimeter, you know, this is still an area, Paul, if you were going to go for a wish list. I mean, who doesn't want a dynamic breakaway receiver like an A.D. Mitchell or a Lad McConkey? I don't know that Georgia has that. I will say Dominic Lovett is a guy that transferred from Missouri last year, was solid but not spectacular. He looked really good, and I think he'll be the guy that Carson could complete a pass to in his sleep, so to speak. I think the key, though, is Carson Beck. I think he's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the nation. If Georgia takes care of business and makes the playoff, he should be a Heisman Trophy finalist. He's the most talented quarterback that Georgia's had since Matthew Stafford.
Well, that's quite a statement. You know, no Bowers, no McConkey. You mentioned Mitchell. I mean, there's a lot to replace, but again, we're talking Georgia. Let me broaden the scope a little bit, Mike, because you're so good about everything in the SEC, and I know you speak around different parts of the country. You're on a lot of shows. Just what are the stories that you sense are the hottest to be following as we turn away from spring football here at the end of next weekend and get ready for summer?
Well, I mean, it's the transfer portal, and listen, that's not sexy. That's not what we signed up for. That's not why people have banners on the wall. That's not what the sports fan wants. But here we are, and the transfer portal is back open again. Now, if we flash back to the winter transfer portal period, we saw Ohio State pilfering starters from Alabama. A center. We saw the running back from Ole Miss, Quinshon Junkins, at Ohio State. We saw Ohio State take Alabama's best player, Caleb Downs, best defensive player. Now here we come into the spring. And this is the curious part to me, because I think that Greg Sankey is probably one of the greatest thinkers among all executives, and I don't know, not just sports, but just CEOs in general. He had to get some pressure, Paul, for the SEC to have this rule where if kids transfer within the SEC after the spring period, they are not immediately eligible. Hence, if an SEC player wants to transfer somewhere and be immediately eligible, he would have to leave the league. That would weaken the league. So you ask yourself, well, why did they make this rule? And the SEC, this is a conference rule, made this rule for these schools to protect these schools from one another, from stealing from one another. But the overall result is that the league is going to lose some talent. And to me, this is one I'm going to sit back and watch. I think this is something that will probably be discussed in Destin. Is this a good rule? Of course, by the time we discuss it, Paul, they may have another rule in place. This thing is so doggone fluid, it's hard to keep up with. It's hard to have a game plan when the rules keep changing. And that's what's happened to college football. I think it's frustrating for not just the fans. I think it's frustrating for the coaches as well, even as they have to operate in this world. You don't hear Kirby complain about it a lot. He basically, threw his arms up and said, like, I don't have control over this. He said, I don't have anybody's phones tapped. I don't know if anybody's tampering with the guys. They either want to be at Georgia or they don't. And that's where Kirby left it. Now, wish list wise, the reality is Georgia doesn't need a whole lot. I mentioned if you could get a dynamic breakaway receiver, well, who wouldn't take that? If you could get an impactful defensive tackle, well, my goodness, there's maybe 3 or 4 of them in the country. But really all they need is another quarterback, scholarship quarterback, and to be the second team or third team guy. Kirby's built this team pretty well, Paul. They're pretty stable. They're pretty solid. And each of these programs around the country now, if you're looking for difference maker guys to win games, you haven't done your job. I don't know how many programs that are in championship contenders are in that position. I don't think many. I know Alabama certainly looked good offensively at times. That you talk about what people are talking about. I think Kalen DeBoer achieved what he wanted. A lot of people are talking about Alabama football after their running backs looked so good.
Talking to Mike Griffith live from the stadium. Mike, you mentioned the spring meetings. It's hard to believe we're 5 weeks away from that, where Texas and Oklahoma will finally have a legitimate seat at that table. Just as we look ahead to that and the summer, you mentioned that one issue, but what else do you think is going to be discussed either front and center or in the around Starbucks at that hotel in Destin?
Scheduling. There was such a push for the 9-game schedule, and there was such a push for a schedule that would allow these teams to play everybody else in the league over the period of 4 years. That was the objective, right? To play different teams every year so teams would have a more balanced schedule over 4 years. And then they came out with a schedule this year where they just flopped it. Well, as I understand it, that is a short-term solution. That's the fair thing to do. It gets you through the current contract. But moving forward, does the SEC try to gain value by adding a 9th game and making their contract more valuable with another conference game? Or do they stand pat with 8, recognizing that if you go to 9 games, you may not get as many teams in the playoff? See, what we don't know is we don't know how this college football playoff committee, and I don't know, is the CEO of Yahtzee part of the, I don't even know who's on it anymore. I don't know who's on. There are some very legitimate people on this committee. It changes. But these are the people that are deciding the fortunes of college football. Do they take a 3-loss SEC team over a 2-loss ACC team? And the answer is, we'll let you know. There's no metrics going in. There's no rule book. We don't know how they're going to be judged. Will there be recency bias? How about difficulty of schedule outside of your league schedule? What about the difficulty of your league? And so this is where Sankey and the presidents and the athletic directors have to huddle and say, what is best for the SEC? Yes, a 9-game schedule would seem appealing. But at the same time, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're going to diminish the value of SEC teams come college football playoff selection committee time. And that's the hard thing to really judge. And when I look at Georgia's schedule and I see that they're playing at Alabama and they're playing at Kentucky and they're playing Clemson neutral site and they're playing at Texas and they're playing at Ole Miss. I mean, if they lost 3 games, would they be a playoff team? I don't know. I'm not sure. 2 losses, not sure. There's also the question of the loser of the SEC championship game. How do you not play in the SEC championship game and have it better than a team that played in the SEC? Oh, wait a minute, Alabama 2017. But in reality, in today's world, how do you penalize a team for playing in the SEC championship game in the seedings for the college football playoffs? So I think those are a couple of the items that I've heard bantered around a little bit, Paul, and then I think that the league will work and attempt to solve. But again, so fluid between now and then. I think that plenty of other things could come up. But right now, I think that scheduling issue, moving past these next couple seasons, is something that's going to be on the table.
And we will see Griff down there on the beach in just a couple of weeks, and we can't wait. We'll talk to him before that, of course. Mike Griffith joining us from Athens here on this Tuesday afternoon. We'll get to your phone calls in a moment. More